Hi, welcome back to Madness and Meaning. Kelly and I are super excited about this conversation today, where we're going to be exploring the nature of the unconscious mind, where the unconscious mind comes from, why we have a conscious and then an unconscious, how the unconscious mind is developed, and how it can very sneakily run our lives without us really knowing, unless we're paying really close attention, and how we can fall into disempowering patterns or ways of operating and showing up in our lives that we don't necessarily intend to or desire to, but it ends up kind of being our mode of operation. And I think that this is going to be a really interesting exploration, since I think both Kelly and I explore this quite a bit with our own clients, and we've kind of explored this quite a bit inside of ourselves. So I'm going to let Kelly take the lead on this conversation, and I would love to start with kind of your analysis on what the unconscious is, how the unconscious is formed, and why we have a conscious awareness and an unconscious awareness.
Whenever I'm introducing unconscious work with anybody, whether it's just me passing it in conversation with a friend because I think this stuff is so interesting, or when I'm introducing it inside of my work with a client, I always like to context it very simply by just pointing out that there's so much of our life that is unconscious, and that's a really good thing, because imagine how exhausting life would be if we had to consciously think about what muscles to activate and how much we had to do that in order to like turn a doorknob or like pour a coffee or whatever it is, like everything throughout the day. We have so much of that be automated by patterns, by behavioral patterns, activity, and thought patterns, beliefs, and emotional patterns that have just been imprinted into us throughout our lives to make things basically easier because it's more automatic. And the problem comes in when some of that earlier programming just becomes outdated or doesn't get upgraded to match who we are now and what it is that we want now, or the resources and the learnings that we've had up until this point in our lives. And so we run into a lot of trouble with the unconscious mind, usually, even though we don't usually become aware of it. We just end up being stuck in patterns of, a lot of people might call it self-sabotage, but really what's going on is that we say that we want something, and either we are doing all of the right things to try to get there or to try to get out of something that we don't want, but we're not seeing consistent progress or movement towards that thing that we want, or movement away from the circumstance that we're in that we don't like. And we get really frustrated. We feel like we're the victim, life is out to get us. Or we might turn it around on ourselves and see maybe there are parts of our lives that we're not showing up in the way that we intend to. Maybe we say we're going to start doing something differently, or say that we're going to start interacting in our lives differently. But then no matter how good our intentions are to do that, it doesn't happen consistently. And we can all trace this back to our unconscious mind, more specifically, our unconscious patterns of desire and unconscious fears.
Bravo. I feel like you kind of summed that up quite well. Yeah, I think that the nature of the unconscious mind to me feels like when we have parts of our thoughts, feelings, belief systems, or memories that we hold a lot of pain around, or maybe they're too complex for us to fully grasp consciously, they kind of slip into our unconscious awareness so that we don't have to be like analyzing them all the time, like you said, or we can kind of go on autopilot a little bit, and it makes life a little bit easier. The human body likes to be in homeostasis and be in an environment where we can kind of coast a little bit and find the easiest way to go about doing things. But especially when we experience things in our life that create a very large degree of emotional pain and discomfort, that can be really difficult to consciously be living inside of all the time. And especially when there is shame and rejection involved in whatever aspect of that that is highlighting for us that we don't want to associate with anymore, we wish didn't exist, and we reject inside of ourselves, it can slip, it doesn't go away. When you reject a part of you, unfortunately, that part doesn't just disappear. It actually slips into your unconscious and lives there. And I think that kind of the way I like to explain this to people is that the unconscious's purpose for itself is to make itself seen, heard, and acknowledged. And so it will try to get your attention as much as possible until you acknowledge its existence. And sometimes the way it gets your attention is through your actions, through your responses to another person's actions, thoughts, opinions, belief systems, or whatever's happening in your environment. And
Yeah.
that's when we start to recognize a dissonance between the what we want and what we're actually doing.
I would love to give a personal example of when we reject a part of ourselves, it doesn't go away, it just becomes unconscious. Because this has been such a mind blowing part of the work for me that I'm still sort of working with in my life to this day. And I've been working with it in a lot of different modalities, and I can share that as well. But the core of it is that when I was younger, I learned that I got attention and affection and what felt like love from the people around me when I was suffering. And as someone that was an only child, and I was going to say lonely child, that too was very lonely,
A
um,
lonely only child.
a lonely only child. Didn't really have any friends growing up. Also, just absent parents for different reasons. And so that was like the bane of my existence when I was younger. And when I kind of discovered this hack of like, when I tell someone that I'm really sad or that I'm struggling or that I had a bad day or that someone said something bad about me or I cry or whatever it is, that feels really good to get their attention in that way. And so I kind of started creating a world around me where I was looking for reasons to suffer almost in a way so that I could get that thing that I wanted, which was love, attention, support, etc. But very quickly, I learned that that was wrong and something to be ashamed of, that makes me an attention seeker, that people will then reject me because of that, and I'll end up not getting what I wanted anyways. And so, because I learned that when I am actively seeking out suffering or telling someone about something that I'm struggling with to try to feel loved and supported by them, that that's wrong, that I had to kind of get really sneaky with it. And that's when this desire to feel loved and supported through telling people that I'm suffering started to slip into my unconscious. And that's where patterns of suffering, but in more of an automatic state, like anxiety, started to come up, where I just felt like a victim to my own mind. But then I started to also hide that as well. I got really creative with like not letting on to people that I'm suffering. So then I started like creating this whole persona of like someone who's so happy and so bubbly and is doing well and everyone loves them because they're so happy, when really I'm like dying inside. And into my adulthood, this really expressed itself as exactly that, as being someone who was so unbelievably unhappy, in fear constantly. Um, and even though life was going relatively well for me from the outside, I just felt like I was not okay constantly. But I never let that on to anyone. In fact, I would actively lie or feel really uncomfortable when people asked me how I was doing. I would never be honest about that at all. And this started to come into my awareness that there was a part of me that actually weirdly desired to get attention from people through them knowing that I'm suffering. When I started to, well, it started to come to my awareness mostly because this was part of the work that I was learning, and I was reading about it in books, specifically going to reference existential kink. But even before that, there was just something that I was waking up to where even though I told myself that I didn't want to bother people with my stuff and that I could deal with it alone and blah blah blah, what I really felt when I was really struggling with something is I would imagine myself telling people about it. This was a really weird experience that I had where I was just like suffering, getting anxiety, stressing out about things like alone in my house. And then I would almost like fantasize about receiving support from people or someone asking me how I'm doing and me actually telling them that I was not doing okay and just feeling like weirdly blissful over that imagination. And over time, I started to connect the dots that there is a part of me that loves receiving that attention from people. But it felt so disgusting, so wrong, and so yucky because of the feedback I got from that and being called an attention seeker and all of the shameful things that came with that, that caused me to reject that part of myself so that I had to act it out unconsciously and suffer in silence a lot of the time because what I was really trying to get was ultimately love, but I didn't let myself receive it.
What I have learned above all else is the one thing underneath it all that we all want more than anything else is to feel loved. That's what it always comes down to. And when we don't inherently feel worthy or capable of feeling loved from us to us, we seek it outside of us. And then we reject the part of us that we think is making us unworthy, right? Whatever that is, it can be different for everybody, but the aspect of you that you feel like is in your way of being lovable, you reject that part. And then you go out into the world and you seek to find love, to find connection, to find validation outside of you. And I think this is where it gets really tricky, is because this is where the self-sabotage comes in, where because you don't feel inherently capable or worthy of being loved, you fear failing at it. And it becomes more painful to seek it out and fail than to never get it in the first place, because of the rejection along with the failure would just compound itself on top of the rejection that you're already feeling inside of yourself, because all of this is coming from a place of self-rejection. And I think this feeds into this like projection aspect of this whole cycle, where the thing that we're denying inside of ourselves is the thing that we seek outside of ourselves. And then the way it plays out externally just ends up mirroring exactly what's happening internally. But I think that there's also like a nuance of like getting off on it a little bit.
Yes.
And I would love for you if you could speak into that a little bit, because I
Mm-hmm.
don't think that that's something that we're aware of. And I think if you told somebody that they secretly loved the situation that they found themselves in with the self-sabotage, things not working out for them, replaying patterns, they would think you're absolutely insane.
Yeah. Yeah. And it feels totally insane until
Yes.
you start to access it and look at it through a self compassionate lens, I think. And that's where it was really hard for me in the beginning when I started to become aware of the fact that I really loved to tell people that I was suffering or be negative to people to receive their attention because it was like, oh, like that's bad. That's wrong. I shouldn't want people to give me attention or I shouldn't feel like they owe me that because I'm suffering. That's my responsibility or I shouldn't burden other people with that. There was a lot of story about that that made it wrong. But when I started to see it simply as just like, I want to feel loved. I want to feel supported. I want to feel connected to people. It took some of that wrong story away and allowed me to really lean into it isn't wrong that I want that. It makes perfect sense why I would feel good receiving other people's pity in a way. And I started practicing this using some of the example tools in the book Existential Kink that goes into this in great detail, which essentially are just around feeling somatically the part of you that gets quote unquote turned on by you having the thing that your mind tells you that you don't want.
Yeah.
And so I got to apply this relatively recently. If anyone listened to our first episode, they know a little bit about just the crazy thing that I went through when I was on my way flying to Australia, which is where I'm at right now, and I'm currently living here. My flight emergency landed in India, and I was trapped there for 3 days without a passport. It's incredibly stressful. It was just chaotic and blah, blah, blah. But almost immediately, as soon as this whole fiasco started to unfold, I had it top of mind because I had just finished rereading the book Existential Kink. And I watched myself immediately start telling myself stories about how inconvenient it was that we were emergency landing, how I might miss a flight now, how I don't know if I'm going to get my second flight paid for because we booked our flight with a travel agency or a third-party website, and blah, 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 like all the stories about how I was the victim and this is not what I wanted at all and how I wish that life was different. And because I had the awareness, having recently refreshed myself on the power of the unconscious mind, I was like, why would I actually want this? Why would I actually want to be put in a position where I am stranded without a passport and I'm wasting a bunch of extra money that I didn't plan on? And that just kind of planted the seed for me to be aware of what this could really be about for me. If my reality is a projection of my unconscious mind, my unconscious desires and fears, what is this trying to show me about me? Was essentially my living inquiry during this entire experience. And it was fascinating what I noticed, because as soon as I started to, and not even doing this consciously, but I was just updating people in my life around what was going on. I started posting just the crazy fiasco that was unfolding on my Instagram story. And the amount of people that flooded my DMs, flooded my comment section around how much they were worried for me, how they were giving me advice and stuff that I could do, trying to help me. They're telling me how crazy the situation is, how they're, on their phones, like anxiously awaiting me to continue updating everyone on what's going on with the situation. When I was conscious and grounded and aware enough to be able to access what my present experience of that was, it was so exhilarating. It felt so good. And it turned me the fuck on to be receiving that much attention, that much just like genuine support, and people showing me that they cared about me, that it was just like, wow, did my unconscious mind create this scenario so that I would have the ability to have this thing that I feel like I really want, but also don't let myself have, or feel like I don't have much in my life. Not that I'm unsupported in my life, but it feels like that's something I've rejected a lot by being someone that doesn't really share what I'm going through, or feels weird sharing sharing with people what I'm going through, and feels really uncomfortable asking for support when I'm struggling with something. And so during this entire 3-day experience in India, it was such a spiritual experience of just like allowing myself to notice that ping that I felt every single time I opened my Instagram and saw that I had like 20 unread DMs. Or that like I would open Facebook and have so many messages from people. I just felt an embodied like of just like yes, or like pleasure almost in a way from that. And I was really conscious and aware, having recently refreshed myself on the power of this and tools from the book Existential Kink. I was intentional to not let myself make that wrong, or to reject that there was something really pleasurable about that. And instead, I started consciously and intentionally telling myself things like, yeah, it does feel really good that so many people are concerned about this. And it's okay that I want this, or that I want people to show me that they're worried about me, or that people are pitying me based on the situation that I'm in. because that feels so good. And it was a cool experience to see kind of how the situation unfolded. The more intentional I was about allowing myself to almost like drink in the pleasure that I was getting from all of the attention and support. Because the more that I was grounded in doing that, the faster the things started to resolve. There was a period of time during those 3 days where things would like start to resolve themselves and then like way backtrack and then would start to resolve themselves and then things would go haywire. And it was like crazy. And that was kind of my motivation to be like, can I actually control this? And it was just an experiment for me almost of like, how much of this am I in control over based on how intentional I am with how my unconscious mind might be playing into what's actually going on. And by allowing myself to actually feel the manifestation of my unconscious desire coming true and not making that wrong, but actually allowing myself to feel fulfilled by it and to really drink in the pleasure of everyone's support, pity, attention, etc., that maybe the situation would eventually start to resolve itself because I no longer need to recreate
Right.
all of the external suffering in order to get that thing that I deeply want.
I've noticed this play out in myself recently too, where the thing that I would complain about most was that my clients never wanted to do the deep, dark work that I wanted to do. And they never wanted to go there, and nobody was capable but going there except for me. Why am I always attracting the clients that are just not ready for the work that I wanted to do with them? And I was constantly like frustrated inside of my job. And I was like, what if I love this?
Yeah.
If I just gave myself permission, because I keep telling myself I hate it, but it
Mm-hmm.
keeps happening over and over and over again where I'm disappointed and I'm frustrated and I'm unhappy and I'm feeling stuck inside of the work I'm doing with my clients. What if on some really sick, sadistic, twisted level, I loved it?
Mm-hmm.
Why would I love that? Well, I love it because it allows me to feel validated inside of how evolved I've become. Because what I want most, what my unconscious wants most, is to feel validated, to feel loved, to feel respected.
Yeah.
And when my clients can't meet me where I want them to meet me, I get to feel it, just the shadow side of it. And it's just my unconscious being like, hey, you don't show yourself enough love. And this is how you're sadistically like reinforcing this insecurity that you have that you're not good enough. It's this weird way of feeling better than when everyone is beneath you type of feeling. And I think that it can play out in that way. It's just very subtle. It takes
Yes.
a lot of like insight to be able to see it that way. But I do think that that happens quite a bit. And so, like, we find ourselves in these scenarios where we tell ourselves that we're miserable and we hate it, but there's a part of us that desires to recreate it over and over again.
Yes. Yeah. And there's always something deep that we want, whether it's love and connection, or it's that significance, it's that feeling of validation that you got, or it's a feeling of just like safety or feeling okay, feeling certain, feeling like your outcome is predictable that we get from these undesirable situations coming up. I'll give real quick one other example of how it leads to a feeling of safety for me within my relationship patterns in my late teenage to early adulthood. Every single relationship that I had ever entered was one that I consciously really hated. Like every relationship, I had a projection of that person where they were not enough and they were not fulfilling and they were this and they were that and they were never, the right person that I wanted. But I kept getting into relationships in that way where I felt unfulfilled by the other person. And consciously, all I said I wanted was to be in a relationship with someone that I felt was, an equal, or that I could grow with, or that, was into the same things that I was into, or that was interesting, or was successful, or was hardworking, or whatever. And I never had that, but that's all I said that I wanted. And it wasn't until I questioned why I might actually not want that. I might not actually want someone that I see as an equal, someone that challenges me, someone that is successful, XYZ. Because when I was exclusively getting into relationships with people that I felt better than, or that they liked me more than I liked them, I felt safe. I felt like they weren't going to reject me. I felt like they would never leave me, and that I had the upper hand. I had the power in the relationship dynamic, which gave me an illusion of safety, even though everything in my conscious mind hated it and was like, why do I keep dating these men? But like, I actually only exclusively wanted to be in relationship with those types of people, unconsciously, because otherwise I would have felt extremely insecure and extremely unsafe.
And the same for me when I can complain that my client can't meet me where I desire to go. There's this unconscious desire for them not to, because if they can, I won't be able to hold them through it. I won't know what to say. I won't be able to do it. I won't be good enough. And so there's always this deeper desire that the reality that we're creating is the reality that we're actually wanting. And that's where the unconscious work is really valuable, is uncovering, if this is the reality that I tell myself I don't want, what is the part of me that's desiring it? And I think that that's a very backwards way of looking at it. But when I have started to look at myself and that my life in that way, oh my God, I uncovered so much about myself that I didn't know was there. And
Same.
I can feel people listening to this being like, this is so ridiculous and backwards. Like, why is this something that we have to go through? Why can't it just be obvious? Like, why can't, like, life would be so much easier if we can just obviously understand what it is that's blocking us so that we can move through it. Why does it have to be so complicated? And like, what is your take on that?
To me, it's not complicated at all. If you really look at the core of all of it, it's that we desire certain things and we have just unconsciously associated that certain things will not get us that. So, for example, if I want to feel safe, I want to feel good enough, I want to feel worthy, I want to feel secure, and I've associated that if I am around people that are obviously successful, they're great people, a lot of people like to be around them, they're charismatic, they're attractive, they're blah, 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 that they might leave me, or they might see me as less than, or they might decide that I'm not good enough for them. And so I don't want to be around those people. Now, consciously, I can say, I would love to be around people that are successful and they have things going for them. And I want to surround myself with people that I want to be with, because then we'll grow together. And I can give all the reasons in the world why that would be better. But it wasn't until I allowed myself to integrate and actually acknowledge that there was something really threatening about that thing that I wanted, that I was able to start moving towards having more of what I actually consciously wanted and unconsciously wanted. I was able to create that feeling of safety and security within myself, regardless of who I'm around, so that I can feel that and then still be around the people that make sense for me, or still allow myself to be in relationship with people that are going to support me in being my best self, which is what I consciously wanted. And so to me, it's not complicated. It's just about getting still and being willing to explore why we don't have what we want, why we actually want the things that we have, why on a weird, fucked up level, we might actually want the thing that we say and complain about all the time outwardly in our life, and how the thing that we want so bad, that we're striving for, that we're working so hard for, that we're doing the goals and the vision boards and telling everyone that we're going to find, this is finally going to be our year. By year after year, we can't seem to see any consistent progress towards actually attaining that thing. because we are terrified of it,
We
because
fear
there's
that's
something.
100%. Sorry to interrupt
Yeah.
you.
No, that's perfect. Yeah, we're terrified of whatever it is that
Terrified of
we've
it.
associated with that
Yeah.
thing, whether it's that then we're not going to be safe if we get that thing, or
Yeah.
we're not going to feel good enough, we're going to feel intimidated, we're going to feel like we took on more than we can chew. In your situation with clients, you're going to feel like if you actually are working with people that are ready to go there with you, then you might end up in a position where you don't know where to go with them, and that would
Exactly.
feel way worse.
Exactly. There's an underlying fear of the thing that you say that you want. And that is essentially what is creating all of this, what you could describe as chaos or like self-sabotage or constantly getting in your way or doing the opposite of the thing that you tell yourself you want to do. It's because there's fear associated with it and who you may become as a byproduct of it. There's like an aspect of your identity that requires shifting and changing to get the thing that you want. Who are you going to be? What is your life going to look like? What are people going to think of you? Like there are all of these underlying questions that are ruminating in the unconscious that are creating a lot of fear that are causing you to take action that doesn't seem like it's in alignment with what you want, but it is in alignment with what you want because what you want
Mhm.
is ultimately to not have the thing that you say that you want. You would rather feel safe inside of yourself. And the safety is where you currently are right now. Whereas what you say that you want holds more uncertainty inside of it that feels scary
Yeah, and threatening.
and threatening. Exactly. I always love to take this angle on these kind of conversations because I think it's fascinating. So I asked my guides before this call, I was like, we live in this human reality with like so many divisions inside of our consciousness. We have the conscious part of us, we have the subconscious part of us, we have the unconscious part of us. Like, is this just the nature of the human experience, or is this does this take place in other dimensional realities? Like, why is this part of our experience here? And they're like, it's mainly part of the human experience. So yay, it's exclusive to our time here. But they essentially said that what you want above all else is to feel loved from you by you. And the reason why we want this is because you're sensing a resonance inside of the truth of who you are. And the truth of who you are is unconditional acceptance. And that wasn't good enough for me. So I asked why? Like, why is that what we are? And I'm going to get into a bit of a spiritual conversation now, but it's going to tie back into this general theme for today, where if you believe in the spiritual concept of there is source, there is God, there is the creator, and we are all an extension of it and expressing ourselves through it so it can experience an infinite quantity of itself in all these different ways, then we are all connected. We are all one. And the very nature of oneness means love, acceptance of all things, because we are all things. And so if you believe that we are all one, then the very nature of your energetic vibration is acceptance, because you can't be everything if you're rejecting a part of yourself. And so that lends itself to the very nature that the truth of what you are at your core is unconditional acceptance. And so the reason why we don't feel that about ourselves is because of the nature of the human mind and our biology and the ego, where if we don't feel acceptance on all our parts, then we reject them so that we are not rejected by the outside world. And those belief systems are not inherent to who we are, they are passed down to us by those around us. And so when you believe in your interpretation of you, which is that you are not enough, and that you can't accept all parts of you and that you are not worthy, you are buying into an illusion of what you are and not the truth of what you are. And I just want to put that out there. because I think that so many of us do not feel worthy or capable of what we want. And if you believe in spirituality and the nature of oneness, then here is your opportunity to really buy into the truth of who you are, which is that you are fully worthy and capable of everything that you want and more. And not only that, you don't have to do anything to get it. You don't have to change who you are to get it or change your circumstances. You just have to be willing to accept it here and now.
Yeah.
But I think
Yeah, I
that,
was going to say big but.
but we actively resist that.
Yes.
Why?
Yeah. That's exactly where I was going to take this conversation next. So thank you for reading my mind. We struggle so much with acceptance,
Yeah.
accepting ourselves, accepting reality, accepting parts of other people. And ultimately, what that comes down to, I think, is just our let me start with the self. Why we struggle so much accepting parts of ourself. I can give the example here of me struggling to accept that there was a part of me that really loved and wanted to be pitied, to have other people give me their attention through them finding out that I'm suffering in some way. The reason why I learned to reject that part of me is because I was shown in my outer world, in my outer experience, that that wasn't liked, that that was a quality of mine that was rejectable, and that wasn't inherently threatening. It's going to be inherently threatening to the human being who needs others in order to be okay, who relies on, external resources in order to support themselves, needs to feel loved, needs to feel like a part of something bigger, needs to feel like they have a tribe. And so when the threat of rejection or abandonment or not belonging came in through me seeing a part of myself and recognizing that other people didn't like it, I then learned I could not accept that part of myself, because the threat of accepting that part of myself meant opening myself up to being rejected, to being alone, to not being supported, to not being safe, to not being okay, X, Y, and Z. And so, if we are unconsciously buying into this misunderstanding that by accepting ourselves, we will not be okay, we will not have our basic needs met, we will be rejected, we will be alone, we won't be supported or a part of a tribe, then of course we're going to struggle to accept certain parts of ourselves. But the highlight of this is that is a misunderstanding.
Yes.
And we can totally see some truth in that. There are going to be people that are not going to agree with parts of ourselves, and they are not going to accept parts of us. They might not like it. They might see that part of us and then decide they don't want to be around it. So that is the truth and the reality of it. But just because some people don't have the capacity to accept and love you unconditionally does not mean you're not worthy of it.
Can someone truly ever reject you?
No.
Why? I've grappled with this.
Yeah. I feel like I accessed an understanding of why before, and now I'm trying to come back to it and put it back into words. Because in my body right now, I can feel the resonance of I could never actually be rejected. And I guess the way that my mind can conceptualize it is that when someone is rejecting me externally, they've seen me or they've seen something and they've decided they don't want to be a part of it, that they're not going to include me as part of their life, for example. That is what we consider to be outward rejection. But they are not rejecting me, they're rejecting a thought about me. They have a story of me in their head. There's nothing about me that's true of who I am that they're rejecting.
100% where I was going with this. They don't actually know you. They are interpreting who they believe you to be, and they are choosing to reject the notion of what that is or not. And the interpretation of who they believe you to be is a reflection of who they believe themselves to be and their thoughts and belief systems about themselves and the world around them. And so they are actually rejecting a version of themselves that has nothing to do with you. It
Right.
feels painful, not denying that.
Yes.
That's a completely separate conversation. But the reality of it is that other people's thoughts and belief systems and opinions of you have nothing to do with you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think
Yeah.
that's such an important distinction to make. That saved me in my desire to become a trans channel
Yes.
because the amount of fear that I had to work through on about looking like a lunatic on the internet, like knowing that other people's opinions about who I am and what I'm doing literally have nothing to do with me, freed me
Yes.
to just do what I wanted anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. And if we can take that and apply that to qualities that we all can outwardly agree are not okay, like let's just say someone rejects me because they think I'm selfish or that I have acted selfishly or whatever. Really, what we can look at this from a few angles, but let's take a moment to just acknowledge that if someone is so triggered, like so turned off and so like activated by seeing selfishness in someone else to the point where they would decide they can't be around it, that is likely just it's happening because that other person that they're calling me, that they're calling selfish, is just mirroring to them a part of themselves that they've learned is not okay.
Right.
It's mirroring a part of themselves that at some point in their life they learned was going to get them rejected or cause them to be a victim of abandonment or not be okay or not be safe or whatever it is. And so they are projecting their relationship with their own needs and desires onto me, because their relationship with their needs and desires is that they're wrong. They shouldn't choose them and they should put others' wants and needs and desires above their own. And
Right.
so when they created that belief system, it was because it was a result of them learning that the opposite of that belief, the true nature of them, which is to want what they want, to go after what they want and to put their own needs first, because we are our own selves, right? We're going to know our own needs more than we're going to know other people. They learned that that's wrong. So then they created a new belief system, put that into their conscious mind, let the other one slip into their unconscious. And now they are extremely activated and triggered when they see a selfish quality in someone else, because on some level, unconsciously, it makes them feel better about knowing that that wasn't part of them before because they see it in someone else. But they're not consciously experiencing it as it feels really good to know that someone else is selfish. It's not just me. They're experiencing it as, ugh, gross. They're so selfish and they should think about someone other than themselves. The same stories that they used on themselves at one point in their life when they were ashamed or felt rejected or felt unsafe as a result of this awakening around their selfishness, that they told themselves about themselves. And so if I am being rejected or judged as selfish, first of all, it's because the person that's judging me for it is seeing a part of themselves that they haven't fully owned, accepted, and integrated into themselves. And that is again such a huge part of any goal that someone could have, whether it's to put themselves out there on the internet doing something that maybe other people can see as kooky, or maybe it's to, I don't know, just to fully show up as yourself or to go after, starting a business or to speak vulnerably what it is that your experience of something was to someone and actually owning that rather than just trying to suck it up and not saying what your honest truth was about someone or something that happened within your relationship with them. And when we can remember that if someone else was to judge or reject us because of something that they're seeing in us, that is not only, it has nothing to do with us in our inherent worthiness of love or acceptance, has everything to do with a part of themselves that they haven't fully integrated or accepted within themselves. But also, we can also see it as, and they need to do that that other person is just at the level of consciousness right now where they need to reject and project judgment onto other people to help them deal with the insecurities and the shame that they haven't had or learned any other strategies to deal with. And when we can see
I
it that way, it's so much easier.
I have learned that the evolution of your consciousness happens over multiple lifetimes. And some people are just meant to be experiencing this lifetime inside of the shit without having conscious awareness of it. And then the next time they come back, they will experience the same painful scenario through a different lens, but have a more elevated awareness of it and be able to work through it. We're all moving at different paces and we're all on our own journey, and someone else's level of consciousness has nothing to do with you. That's just where they are and that's how they need to be operating at this point in time. And if it feels painful for you, there may be an aspect of you shaming or judging yourself for that. And that's where the inside job comes in, is showing yourself so much more love, so much compassion, where they don't have the capacity to extend that to you. That's really where we all must do our own work.
Yeah. Self-compassion, I think, is just the medicine to all of it.
Well, I was going to lead into that. Let's say you have a client that's listening to this conversation and saying, I deeply resonate with this. And up until now, I have been feeling completely unworthy and incapable of what I want for myself. And I want to start showing myself more love and compassion, but I don't really know how. Like, where does one begin? Begin to kind of flip the script, change the narrative, and operate in a new way.
Yeah. I think it comes first and foremost with a willingness to see everything as innocent. Because if we can see the innocence of every behavior pattern, everything that we've done in our past, everything that we think, everything that we currently do, everything that we feel, when we can see that it's coming from a very innocent, well-intentioned place, I think that naturally lends itself into being more self-compassionate. When we can see that we are struggling to love ourselves, for example. And maybe that's something that we really grapple with. Like, I just wish that I could be more confident. I wish that I could be kinder towards myself. I wish that I could just let go of all of these insecurities and love myself. That's what I want. Let's just say someone on the other end is resonating with that. First of all, notice that by telling yourself that, it's not helping. It's not helping you love yourself. It's not helping you to move towards more of that self-confident, self-loving place by essentially judging and shaming yourself for not being there yet. So that's just an aside to help you realize that your methods of getting there aren't working so far. So let's just take that into consideration. Now also acknowledge that everything that you do or everything that you experience it that way for a good reason. You learn to experience it that way. And so if you often get caught up in patterns of self-shaming, self-criticism, if you don't choose yourself, if you put other people before you, if you don't show yourself love and care and instead are really hard on yourself, there's a good reason for that. You learn to do that because it helps you feel safe. It helps you feel in control. By you being critical of yourself more so, it probably was learned because you wanted to pick up on things that other people would criticize about you before they got the chance to do it, so that you could either get ahead of it and try to fix it, or at the very least, no one could criticize you and reject you for something that you weren't already aware of, or that you hadn't already rejected inside of yourself. And that gave you a sense of control over the pain so that you didn't have to feel that shame or that pain of rejection and judgment from other people as harshly. And so there's a really great intention inside of your inability to fully love yourself. And if you can see it that way, you're going to be able to offer yourself more compassion in the moments where you're falling into some of those old learned patterns. of being really hard on yourself, of withholding love for yourself, of picking yourself apart in the mirror, or being perfectionistic, or holding yourself to too high of standards, et cetera, you're going to be able to see that with the new understanding of, I'm doing that because I think it's helpful. It helps me feel safe. It helps me feel in control. It helps me hold on to any sense of worthiness that I can through doing that ultimately. And when we can see it that way and we can see that it was innocent, then it's like, okay, I see why I'm doing it that way. Or I see that this isn't all that bad. It might have some negative consequences to it in my life, and it's not exactly how I want to be living my life, but I see why I learned that. And I see why that's my automatic default. I see where I learned that, why I learned it, why I had to learn it, how that was the only way I knew how to deal with maybe some pain, shame, judgment, rejection experiences that I had when I was younger. I didn't have the tools, support, self-awareness, and resources to be able to deal with it in another way. So this was how I dealt with it. And that ability to see it as innocent and offer ourselves self-compassion, I think, starts to lend itself to being more accepting unconditionally of the parts of us that we can see are not exactly where we want them to be. They're not in alignment with how we want to be living our life, but we can at least see that it's there for a reason. And when we have that more compassionate, accepting relationship with a part of ourselves that we previously saw as wrong or that we needed to make it go away, ironically, it softens. It doesn't have as much of a automatic, powerful control and manipulation over how we are in our lives, but rather it's just a part of ourselves that we're learning how to integrate more into who it is that we want to be.
It really is such a process. And the more you try to rush it or make it wrong, when you find yourself reverting or not shaming yourself for not being loving enough
Yeah, shaming
to
yourself for
yourself.
shaming yourself.
Right. And that it really comes down to catching it in
Yes.
all of these different ways that is an evolving process and takes a while. Like self-love and unconditional acceptance is not a short-term journey. It's a lifelong one. And I would even argue that that might not even be the point of it, is to get there. The point is to just experience the evolution of yourself moving through different levels of awareness and different experiences inside of yourself with each one. And if you can allow that to be okay, then the entire process will become a lot more enjoyable, let alone easier.
Yes. Mic drop.
Is there anything else on this topic that you feel like we haven't like fully explored?
Maybe we can do a quick aside into self-sabotage, because I feel like that's a term that we threw around maybe once or twice in this conversation. It was sort of a part of what inspired this topic, and I think we went into it without fully closing the loop on self-sabotage. So let's just say that someone is in a position where they can identify they are self-sabotaging, whatever that means to them. And maybe we start by identifying really what that is. But I think more than anything, I'm interested in just hearing what it is that your overall thoughts on self-sabotage and what that really means and how we can move through it are.
I think that this comes back to the conversation of fearing the thing that you say that you want more than you realize, where there's an aspect of getting it that is deeply threatening on an unconscious level, where either getting it will lead to rejection or failing to get it will lead to rejection. And so if you can stop yourself from ever failing or being rejected, somehow feeling rejected, being rejected, failing in the process, and exacerbating how you're already feeling about yourself, which is unworthy of what you want, incapable of what you want, then it's less painful than going all in and failing, or never trying at all, which you're going to shame yourself for. So it's almost like putting one foot on the brake and one foot on the gas. It's like, well, I'm doing the work, but I'm not going all in with the unfortunate consequence of potentially having the rug completely pulled out from under me and massively falling on my face. But I'm also not taking zero action at all. And therefore, I can't shame myself for never trying.
Right.
And I feel like there's room to play in there, but that's kind of how I kind of reference it.
Yeah. I think the more that we can see self-sabotaging behavior as actually self-supporting behavior, just we're supporting ourselves in a way that we're not consciously aware of.
I love that.
Yeah,
That's
I just thought of
brilliant.
it. It came to me when you were
Yeah,
talking.
the
Um,
goal is not the goal that you think the goal is.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. We might, as a very easy example, and kind of how you and I both started more deeply learning about self sabotage in regards to weight loss, as an example, or health goals, is someone can see overeating at nighttime as self sabotage because the thing that they think they want or that they want to support themselves towards is to eat less or to lose weight or to be healthier, to look different, XYZ. And when they're just staying at the awareness of I'm self sabotaging, it's going to be really hard to overcome that behavior because you're not acknowledging that you're doing that behavior for a reason. So as soon as we start to change our language from that self-sabotage to that self-support, then we can start to question, how am I supporting myself with this overeating at nighttime behavior? And then we might start to create dialogue for ourselves around, well, it helps me feel better, or it helps me feel comforted, or it gives me something to look forward to at the end of the day, or it feels ritualistic. It allows me to numb out at the end of the day, where and I believe that if I don't have that anymore, then I'm going to struggle to sleep, or I'm just going to be staying up in my head in anxiety and thinking about the entire day and not able to completely turn it off. And so there's something that you are getting from that behavior. You're supporting yourself through it in some way. And when you can identify what support you are trying to get from that, you can first question how effective it is. First of all, if that method that you're using to support yourself for that is actually effective at supporting yourself in that way. And maybe what are the positives and the negatives of it? Maybe what are the consequences of it as well? And then we can start to look at, okay, well, if this is what I actually need, this is the support I'm trying to create for myself, are there other ways that I can do that that are more effective and also more aligned with the thing that I've said I've consciously wanted?
And also be okay with the resistance that comes along with doing something different because there's going to be a learning curve
I
to
love
that.
it.
And you're probably going to find yourself gripping onto your old way of operating
That's right. Yeah.
because it's
And
very threatening to do something different, especially if you don't fully trust in it yet. The
yes.
trust comes very slowly with repeated evidence that it's okay. And I think that
Yes.
that's often not fully understood and realized.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm glad you're saying that because I don't want anyone to walk away with this idea that, okay, all I have to do if I'm self sabotaging is just realize that I'm doing it because I want comfort and therefore I should stop it now. A lot of people end up being at when they kind of start moving kind of into a more mindset or inner related journey of some sort, because of something that they've been trying to change externally. They think that the key that they've been missing all along was just self-awareness. And although self-awareness is necessary and great, it's not going to innately automatically unlock the changes you were hoping for. If it did, that'd be awesome. But there's also greater things that we get to gain from a more outstretched journey where that self-awareness gets to lend itself to moments where we still watch ourselves going through patterns that we don't like and see that why we're doing it, but we're still doing it anyways, to offer ourselves and to learn how to offer ourselves more self-compassion, more grace, more patience, more self-forgiveness, because that's also a tool that's going to support all of those changes and integrating in the long run as well.
One interesting kind of angle on this is, and I've seen this quite a bit. I've seen this in myself. I've seen this in clients where when the awareness is there, okay, I'm self-sabotaging. I want to show myself more compassion. I want to change. I want to do things differently. And then getting angry with yourself when you find yourself not being able to, it's not moving fast enough. You're not able to do it as well as you thought you would, and how that's an exemplification of the same thing being manifest through a different way. I think it's really
Yeah.
important to notice that because at the end of the day, you are using the same shame and judgment to fuel the cycle where and I think that there's a lack of trust in self-acceptance now that just it takes time to get there, and you're going to notice yourself repeating this pattern through different ways in your attempt to change something, and the very need for something to change is being exacerbating by a rejection of a part of you. Do you know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean. I'm following. Yes.
And so I think that whenever I channel people's souls, like that is the thing that
Mm,
ultimately comes back to is we spend an hour talking about how they need to show themselves more love and compassion. And
yeah.
then at the end of the session, they're like, so what more can I do to like get there? And like, what can you tell me about my future? And they're essentially not understanding how what they're doing is they're asking for proof of concept because where they are now is still not good enough.
Right.
And I always think that that's so funny when it has to be highlighted all
Yes.
over again. But I think that this just comes down to how important this step of acceptance is, and how learning self-acceptance is not like a one and done thing. It happens in layers very, very gradually where you'll realize that you're withholding it to a certain degree, and then you'll start softening and showing it to yourself. And then you'll realize you're gripping in another place. And then you'll resist softening for a little while. And then you'll
Yeah.
realize it's not working. And you'll soften. And then you'll realize it in a different place. And then you'll grip and resist again. And it's
Yeah.
just this kind of game that we play
It
that
is a
that
game.
it is a bit of a game,
Yeah.
that on some sadistic level you love.
Yes.
But I think that just allowing the natural process of your own self-acceptance journey to unfold in the way it's meant to is just a piece of the puzzle.
Mm, yes. I think that's a beautiful way of wrapping up this conversation because, and I think this is going to be a theme across the board of all of our conversations, is that it is ultimately about waking up to our own loving essence and practicing tools of self acceptance and acceptance overall in order to get the thing that we're talking about in the topic. And so, this topic really being about why we're holding ourselves back, how we're holding ourselves back, how our unconscious belief systems are holding us back. Ultimately, if someone clicked on this episode, it's because they're trying to get somewhere and they recognize they're not getting there, and there might be something going on internally that's preventing that from happening. And I love that you and I are able to both give some practical advice and some understanding around how someone can begin to move towards that, while also giving the through line of, and this is really all about love. Like, all that you want through trying to overcome the struggle or trying to get to that thing is ultimately to feel at peace inside of yourself.
Yeah, through feeling loved for yourself. When you can
Exactly.
finally love yourself unconditionally, you'll feel at peace. And
Right.
I think that that's my takeaway from this conversation is when you notice that you're stuck and things aren't working out the way you want them to, why is this happening? Oh, it's because on some level I'm attempting to feel more love for myself.
Mm-hmm.
Just take a deep breath, feel it right now. It's safe for me to love myself right now. And that's a practice that I have started for myself. And holy shit.
Yeah.
Holy shit, one, you realize how often you deny yourself the thing that you actually want. And two, you realize how good it feels to finally give it and allow
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. And it's always available. It's never not been available.
Right. Yeah. Cool. Anything
Cool.
else you want to add to this?
I don't think so. This was
We love
fun.
you all.
Yes, much love, love and light.
Love and light to all of you. Thank you so much for listening and watching today. And we hope above all else that you can start to ground into the truth of who you are, which is unconditional love and acceptance, and start to explore how that feels and what that means for you in your own time and in your own way.
Beautiful.
Bye. Thank you so much.
Bye.